This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Black Swan Theory. Black Swan Theory, or the theory of black swan events, is a metaphor that describes an event that comes as a surprise, has a major effect, and is often inappropriately rationalized after the fact with the benefit of hindsight. The term is based on an ancient saying which presumed black swans did not exist, but the saying was rewritten after black swans were discovered in the wild. The theory was developed by Nassim Taleb to explain, number one, the disproportionate role of high-profile, hard-to-predict, and rare events that are beyond the realm of normal expectations in history, science, finance, and technology. Number two, the non-computability of the probability of the consequential rare events using scientific methods, owing to the very nature of small possibilities. Number three, the psychological biases which blind people, both individually and collectively, to uncertainty and to a rare event's massive role in historical affairs. Unlike the earlier and broader black swan problem in philosophy, the problem of induction, Taleb's black swan theory refers only to the unexpected events of large magnitude and consequence and their dominant role in history. Such events, considered extreme outliers, collectively play vastly larger roles than regular occurrences. More technically, in the scientific monograph Silent Risk, Taleb mathematically defines the black swan problem as stemming from the use of degenerate metaprobability. Bottom line, rare shit happens. Surprises, by their very nature, are a surprise. You can't predict them. They walk up and punch you in the gut. They smack you upside the head. There's no preparation for the exact timing. What you can do is prepare in full knowledge that we will be hit again and again and again. You just don't know when. I thought today, with Black Swan on my mind, I reached back into time to pull a few minutes from Nassim Taleb, an appearance on C-SPAN, to let him explain his perspective, to get inside his mind, because this is a damn smart mind to get inside of. There's a hell of a lot to be learned.
There are two black swans. There's a bird and then the black swan I discussed. Before the discovery of Australia, people in the old continent did not have any reason to believe that swans could be of any other color but white. And sure enough, that ugly black bird, came to surprise a few specialists, in birds, a few wilders. So my black swan, like that black bird, is an exception. Except that, unlike the black bird, it's an event. So it's an event of severe consequences. You see, take the Great War, take the internet, Google. Most medical discoveries. These are events that have a very high exceptions that have very high consequences. Now, so my black swan, to define it, has three characteristics. Number one, it's an event of very small probability. Two, very high consequence. Although small probability, you can't neglect it because the consequence is so high that although the frequency of occurrence is very small, it will matter in the long run. And three, although before the fact, these events, say like September 11, like the Great War, the First War, these events were improbable, not easy to forecast, actually not hardly, forecastable, After the fact, so we concoct explanations to try to convince ourselves that we understand them. So my point is very extremely aggressive. I'm saying that unless you understand the black swan, you don't understand what's going on. More increasingly so. The problem is we don't understand the black swan. So my book is not so much about skepticism. It's a map of how to behave in a world that we don't understand, And where are the soft spots? Spots that are, black swan prone, therefore difficult for us to understand, in which it's very hard to predict, and in which you have to behave with some humility, intellectual humility.
Now, most of us who read nonfiction books, we spend a lot of time reading economists and social scientists and historians, and they usually describe a world of laws and of patterns, and that history moves in this direction, this direction, this direction. The economists say there's one thing leads to another, and what you're saying is quite different. You're saying that these progressions are not, in fact, the stuff of history. The stuff of history is much more radical and much more unpredictable.
And jumps.
Jumps.
So you don't have linear progression, much more jumps, and you have some discontinuities. And yes, but I say history doesn't glide; it jumps, or it doesn't. It leaps, doesn't glide. So effectively, everything that we've thought that nature doesn't make jumps, nature makes jumps. So history definitely does make jumps. All right. So this is sort of my point, and it has some consequences in a lot of respects. Number one, identifying causal links. The second one in prediction, and three in the validity of some scientific results. Okay, so but this is very easy. There's some domains in which the scientific results of what we know, these results are okay. Domain one, they're not black swan prone, and there are some domains in which our knowledge is extremely soft. Economics, you can't really rely on prediction. Basically, an economist literally doesn't know much more than a cab driver. Political science, finance, areas that are very black swan prone, which is not a problem, okay, if you know it. If you don't know, you have a problem. And then there are domains that we understand very well. Physics, engineering, for the most part. These domains, we're getting extremely good at, handling the error rate, because the errors usually are not very large consequence.
Now, I want to get clear on how radical what you're saying is, because what you're saying is that a lot of what we know from a lot of what financial traders do, and you've been a trader, and a lot of what economists and political scientists do not help us understand the world, and in some ways lead us astray.
Well, they decrease. I mean, if you attend a class in economics, I think, and I have pretty much, I made the case in the book, it decreases your understanding of the world. It decreases it, and of course, you're going to rely on it to take decision. And if you listen to a cab driver, you get the same therapy. Knowledge, I think, is largely a therapy. More than anything else, is to reduce the anxiety we'd have, okay, from living in something we would feel, okay, is random. You get the same therapy, but you take decisions based on what an economist is going to tell you, whereas a cab driver is not going to lead you to make decisions. So this is why it's safer to listen. You get the therapy, talk to cab drivers, and you'll take care of it. So some areas of economics, statistics as a field, okay, is not capable of handling very large deviation. They think they can handle it, but their track record is awful. Statistics as a field works very well in some application, like insurance. Something called the law of large numbers works very well for casinos. It does not work really well in the real world where the uncertainty is less tractable. So I make the distinction between two provinces, one I call Mediocristan and one I call Extremistan. Extremistan is completely governed by the exception. Mediocristan is completely governed by the regular, by collection of a lot of regular things. And to give you an example, not a single day is going to make any one of us thin or overweight, okay, or much more overweight. Okay. So not a single day, but a single second can make you poor or rich. So, or very rich or extremely poor. So the second domain, wealth, is very black swan prone. The first domain is not very black swan prone.
So it's these punctuating moments, the 9/11s, the Russian revolutions, that are off the charts from normality, that are the key drivers of how events happen and how lives are shaped.
Exactly, but I'm glad you're mentioning the Russian Revolution, because for a lot of people, of course, it was, for a lot of people, unpredictable. I'm sure it was collectively not very well predicted, but after the fact, it seems as if it were, or it seemed for many, particularly the Marxists, that it was part of the course of history.
Right, so what we do is we go back and we invent post hoc rationales to explain things that really, and the rationales are myths.
Exactly. I mean, we have evidence. In a book I discuss, Niall Ferguson, who is a brilliant historian, went back to the First War and said, the First World War. The Great War in history books seems to be, an event that partook of a big, grand course of history, okay, that you had tension building up to the point of a single catalyst could make it explode. That was not true. There was tension throughout history between Great Britain and Germany and Austria. So you had tension throughout history. A lot of tension led to parties, all right, and then they get some makeup, and then some tension did not lead to the Great War. So you have to count how many predecessors, okay, led to nothing, okay, before ascertaining whether that was a cause. So effectively, he looked at the war bonds. War bonds did not price in a war. Okay, so the sentiment before that was that, hey, it's another tension that would lead nowhere. And when the war started, we couldn't predict how long it's going to last. People were rushing to the front. So in history, in retrospect, we think that because you retain elements that seem to confirm your thesis, right, and you forget the what I call the silent evidence. And let me illustrate that with the story of this book. Before the success of this book, everybody thought this was a loser's proposition because publishing such a dense book, that's dense, it's very dense, in no discipline, because it straddles psychology, philosophy, historiography, different branches of philosophy, epistemology and philosophy of history, and at the same time finance, economics, social science. Okay, they said, hey, and it's dense and has 1,100 references. It had 2,000 references, brought it down. People said it's impossible, it's not going to sell. Now that it's sold, someone made a statement, publisher, not my publisher. My publisher is too smart to make a statement. This book succeeded because it has an animal and a color on its cover, black and swan.
Yeah.
Right? It's very simple. So it's exactly the error you make, a retrospective error. I went back and looked at first of all, at how many books have the black swan in their title, not just any animal, all right? And found 93. Okay. And then, of course, you have pink elephants, you have different permutation of colors, and so basically when you look so he did not realize, okay, that you cannot make such statement unless you look at the flops, all right, that have animal and color on the cover, you see. So it's like you take an event, okay, this book was successful, now so far 15 weeks on the bestseller list. What does it have that's distinctive? Well, a color, on the cover, and a black and white, and an animal. Well, therefore, that's what led it to succeed. So this shallow inference, okay, is so prevalent in domains like history, where you don't have where the history is written by the winner. You don't have actually literally written by the winners, not just human winners, but by the fact that won. So you don't have all that, what I call the cemetery, I call it the cemetery of silent evidence. This is what prevents us from really understanding the causality in history. You have the same thing in finance. There was a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Okay, one of the authors wrote another book called The Millionaire's Mind after the success of the first book. And in it, he analyzed millionaires, and I read it. And of course, you take millionaires, see what do they have in common that they don't share with the general population, where they like to take risks and they work hard. That's fine. Does it mean that was a cause of their success? Only if bankrupt people don't work hard, and take a lot of risk. And effectively, if you look at the bankrupt, if you wrote a book called The Bankrupt Person's Mind, you would find that person take a lot of risks, right? Took a lot of risks, or has risk-taking propensity. And so therefore, this is a problem with history, is that you only see the salient, the very visible.
That's very depressing. In that second book, one of the facts in The Millionaire Mind that I enjoyed was that the average collegiate GPA for a self-made millionaire was 2.7. So you had C-plus students making all that money, but as you point out, there are probably a lot of C-plus students who aren't making that kind of money. Just so we understand how you're describing events, a lot of people think of that events flow like the climate, say. It's a complex system, but if we could have computers fast enough to calculate all the different factors playing in events, we could understand the flow of patterns. But you're saying something different, which is that even if we have this phenomenal analytic ability, we wouldn't be able to understand because there are all the tremendous discontinuities.
Yeah, you're right, and I have to warn people against putting a lot of faith in complexity, or in the first thing you learn from complexity is the following: is that putting more computer power, more mathematical power, often don't lead anywhere, but they lead in an increased confidence in your abilities to understand something. It leads to more, what I call the narrative fallacy. We're good at narrating the past. We do that now mathematically. And let me tell you why. if something is nonlinear, so many equations that could possibly explain it. So you may find an equation that explains what happened, but it will not be the right one. Odds are it's not the right one because so many possible equations in a nonlinear framework that can do the same thing. And each one of them would lead to a different forecast.
Yeah, well, let's take a concrete example. There's a lot of talk about global warming,
Yes.
complicated event far in the future. Does what you're saying have applications to how we should think about global warming?
Yes, I have two statements about global warming that come from the Black Swan. The first statement would please one of the factions, is that we are not good at understanding what's good for us, what's bad for us. But it should opt for conservatism, hyper-conservatism ecologically. Just like in medicine, we don't understand the human body. We thought we understood it. We told the mothers not to breastfeed, and look what happened. The results are people in bad health, both the mother and the child. So the same thing applies to the environment. We don't understand the environment, so let's leave it the way it is. Let's leave this planet the way we got it. So I'm hyper-conservative ecologically, not because I am certain that I'm going to harm it, but because the benefit of the doubt should be one-sided. Let me not harm the environment. The second point. Okay, so I'm conservative ecologically. On the other hand, all these models of global warming. I can probably produce a model. You and I could produce a model if we had, some time, and you can hire a couple of mathematicians to help solve equations. You can probably produce something that can compete with the existing models, explain the past in the same way, and probably produce forecasts that are drastically different. So I don't really. Plus, we don't need to prove that we're harming the planet for us to stop polluting. It's like the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Should be in other words, it's a one-sided type proposition. Let's not. So I won't take a medication if it's not part of my heritage to take the medication. You see, we didn't use it pre-agriculture. I'm not going to have it. Even it's not. I don't have to prove that it's bad for me not to use it. So this is my position on global warming. Now let me get a little more technical. In this book, I have two possible metaphors. The first one concerns our understanding of the process that can lead to a given result is generally weak. Let's say I have an ice cube. I put an ice cube on this table. See, any second-rate engineer or any second-rate mathematician would be able to forecast how this ice cube would melt and how the water would be dispersed on this table. Okay, but conditional on seeing water on this table. Okay, it would be very hard to reconstitute the ice cube. Right. So many possible ice cubes could have led to that water. Right. But likewise, when you observe the world, so many different equations can explain what we see. You see, so many different equations could explain what we have around us. That's the first metaphor I use in the book. The second one, a nonlinear system to show the difficulties we have. Everybody knows the metaphor of the butterfly in India flapping its wing, causing a rainstorm near C-SPAN's studio. Okay, everybody knows that metaphor. The problem is you got so many butterflies, so many wings, and so many different animals that can cause different effects. So reverse engineering is much harder than engineering. But this little what we call dependence on initial condition can be quite, can really be quite thwarting for our ability to forecast. And let me show you how. Poincaré, who's one of my heroes in the book, came up with this idea that later on was rephrased as following problem. If I am playing with billiard balls, I can easily forecast the outcome of the second shot, the second bounce, the outcome of the second bounce. I can easily forecast with a very simple equation. But to forecast the ninth bounce, the gravitational pull of every single person in the room needs to be taken into account. So your precision in forecasting degrades very, very quickly. So you need more and more precision, okay, in understanding your initial conditions. Right. To forecast a 53rd bounce, okay, a very simple system like billiard balls, every single elementary particle in the universe needs to be part of your equation. The lesson from that is that our ability to forecast degrades in these complex systems very quickly, very, very quickly. See, you can forecast tomorrow's weather. You won't be able to forecast next century's climate. And this is what comes out of these very simple equations. It's much harder. You have to have much more precision at the initial condition level and the structure of the model.
If you've not yet read it, go buy it. The book, Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. This whole conversation of Black Swan right into my newest edition of Trend Following, coming in April 2017. I've gone back and I have found, literally going back centuries, so-called Black Swan events. Those rare beasts that walk up and just bite you right when you least expect them. But hey, I know right now there's no reason to be thinking about this. Nothing could possibly happen in current modern day international life. The nation state is ascendant. Politicians are rising. The people are also rising. I can't imagine any conflict or any chaos or anything that could possibly upset the apple cart, so to speak. It's all smooth sailing. Just sit back, relax, enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. This Black Swan stuff, put it aside. Mr. Taleb, he's just worrying too much. There's no current evidence of a Black Swan. As you might have guessed, I am mocking the entirety of those people out there that have lulled themselves to sleep. They've sung themselves the lullaby. They're not worried about anything. Look, I'm a happy guy. I'm not worried about anything either. But I'm prepared. And you should be too. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, Trend Following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right Trend Following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.